The ER doors flew open just past midnight. Dr. Marcus Webb glanced up from his sutures. Two military officers heading straight for him, uniforms sharp despite the hour. Through the glass, a helicopter sat on the roof, rotors still turning. One officer gripped a black folder wrapped in red security tape. Didn't need to see inside to know what this was about. Military trauma only landed in civilian hospitals when their own facilities were maxed out. My hands, still gloved, still stained from the motorcycle wreck I'd just pieced back together. "Dr. Webb." The older one stepped close, jaw set hard. "We need you at Forward Operating Base Kessler, now. I've got 23 casualties here. Mass trauma event." His words cut clean through. "Their surgeons down." 23. My stomach twisted. I looked over at Dr. Patel, my attending. She was already nodding. She knew. She also knew what I'd never mentioned to anyone here, that my father was Colonel Raymond Webb, decorated veteran. The man who'd spent my childhood wishing I'd been born different. Someone who could follow him into combat instead of choosing a scalpel over a rifle. "How long do I have?" "You don't. Helicopter leaves in 3 minutes." I stripped the gloves, grabbed my medical bag, followed them toward the roof. My phone buzzed. A text from my father, still unanswered from earlier that week. "Dinner next month?" "Your mother insists." The same dutiful invitation twice a year. Checkbox communication from a man who'd made it clear that saving lives in an OR would never measure up to taking them on a battlefield. The helicopter's interior, metal and fuel. Through the window, city lights dissolved into dark countryside within minutes. The younger officer, a lieutenant with restless hands, leaned forward. "Sir, you should know. The attack came from inside the perimeter. We don't know who we can trust." I turned to him. "Then you'd better trust that I know what I'm doing." His eyes dropped to my hands, steady, confident, hands that had performed over 3,000 surgeries. My father had never watched me work, never stood in an OR and seen me hold someone's life in my palms. Never wanted to. The helicopter banked hard left, below, the base, lights blazing, vehicles moving in chaotic patterns around a central building, smoke rising from the eastern perimeter. Whatever happened there happened fast and recent. "ETA 2 minutes, the pilot announced. "They're clearing the landing zone now." I checked my bag one more time, running through the mental checklist I'd built over 10 years of emergency surgery. Trauma shears, hemostats, IV kits, intubation supplies, pressure bandages, everything I needed to keep people breathing long enough to reach a real OR. The lieutenant was staring. "Your father never mentioned you were a surgeon." My hands froze on the zipper. "You know my father?" "Everyone knows Colonel Webb. He's a legend. Talks about his military career all the time." He paused, expression shifting. "But he never talks about having a son." The helicopter touched down before I could respond. The side door slid open. What I saw made my breath catch. The landing zone wasn't just clearing. It was a massacre. Bodies on stretchers, soldiers running, someone screaming for morphine. Blood everywhere, turning the concrete dark under the floodlights. A commander approached, face hard. "You're the civilian doctor." "I'm the surgeon." I stepped onto the ground. "Where do you need me?" He looked me up and down, skepticism obvious even in the chaos. "We requested a military surgeon, someone with combat experience." "You requested a trauma surgeon." I met his eyes. "You got one. Now, where are your casualties?" He jerked his head toward the medical building. "Triage is inside. But, sir, you should know." He hesitated, glancing at nearby soldiers. "Some of these wounds, they're not from the attack we reported. Someone here did this. Someone close." My medical training kicked in, shutting down the fear. Then we treat everyone until we figure out who. I started walking toward the building, bag heavy on my shoulder. Behind me, I heard the commander radio someone. Get Colonel Webb's son set up in OR1, and someone find out why the hell nobody told us who he was. My father's name. Here. Of course he was connected to this base somehow. Of course my first military trauma case would circle back to the man who'd spent decades proving I'd made the wrong choice. But right now, 23 people needed me more than I needed to process that bitter irony. Inside the medical building, the air hung thick with antiseptic and panic. A young medic, barely 20, grabbed my arm. Doctor, we've got a sucking chest wound in Bay 3, 2 GSWs in Bay 5, and a soldier in Bay 1 who's coding. Show me Bay 1 first. We ran. The soldier in Bay 1 was already blue when I reached him. 2 medics doing compressions, faces streaming with sweat. The heart monitor showed a flat line that made my training scream for action. How long has he been down? I dropped my bag, moved to the head of the bed, hands already reaching for the intubation kit. 90 seconds. One medic gasped. We lost his pulse after we moved him from the... Stop talking. Keep compressing. I tilted the soldier's head back, checked his airway. Clear. Slid the laryngoscope in, found the vocal cords, threaded the tube through. Bag him now. The medic squeezed the ambu bag while I listened to his lungs. Equal breath sounds. Good. But his heart was still flatlined. I looked at his chest. No obvious wounds, no blood. This wasn't trauma from the attack. What happened to him? The medics exchanged glances. He collapsed during the firefight, sir. Just dropped. My mind raced. Young soldier? Sudden cardiac arrest. No visible trauma. I pressed my fingers to his neck, feeling for any abnormality. There. A small puncture mark. Almost invisible. Someone injected him with something. The medics froze. Get me epinephrine now, and find whoever treated him first. One medic ran for the medication while the other kept compressions. I studied the puncture mark more carefully. Precise. Deliberate. Not from any combat injury I'd ever seen. Someone had done this on purpose. The epinephrine arrived. I pushed it into his IV line, watching the monitor. Nothing. Another round of compressions. Another dose. The monitor flickered. One beat, then another, then a rhythm. We've got him back. I breathed out, but my hands were shaking now, not from adrenaline, from realization. This soldier hadn't been injured in combat. He'd been poisoned. Before I could process that, the commander burst through the door. Dr. Webb, we need you in OR1 immediately. We've got a soldier with a severed femoral artery who won't last another 5 minutes. I looked at the young soldier I'd just revived, now stable but unconscious. Someone on this base had tried to kill him, and I was the only person who knew it. Keep him monitored, I told the medics. Don't let anyone near him except medical personnel you personally trust. And I mean personally. I grabbed my bag, followed the commander down the hallway. The operating room was smaller than I was used to, but equipped. A soldier lay on the table, his leg wrapped in pressure bandages already soaked through. 2 nurses stood ready, faces grim. Bleeding started 3 minutes ago, one nurse reported. We can't get it controlled. I moved to the table, pulling on fresh gloves. Has he been typed and crossed? O negative is already running. I cut away the bandages. The wound was deep, jagged, definitely from the attack. But the femoral artery wasn't just severed. It was shredded, like someone had deliberately made sure it couldn't be easily repaired. My father's voice echoed from years ago. Medicine is what you do when you're not brave enough to fight. I pushed it away, focused on the vessel in front of me. Clamp. The nurse slapped it into my palm. I isolated the artery, clamped above and below the damage, started the repair. My hands moved with practiced precision, each stitch perfect, each movement economical. This was what I'd trained for. This was what I was good at. 10 minutes later, the bleeding stopped. The soldier's pressure stabilized. I closed the wound, stepped back. He'll need monitoring, but he'll keep the leg. The nurses looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years, respect that had nothing to do with who my father was. Here, in this moment, I wasn't Colonel Webb's disappointing son. I was just a surgeon who'd saved a life. Dr. Webb. I turned. A general stood in the doorway, his uniform marked with more medals than I could count. His face was familiar somehow, like I'd seen it in old photographs. Yes, sir. He stepped into the OR, eyes moving from the soldier on the table to me. I served with your father in Afghanistan. He never mentioned he had a son who was a surgeon. There it was again. That same observation. That same confused hurt when people realized my father had erased me from his story. He doesn't mention me much, I said, keeping my voice steady. The general's expression softened. Then he's a fool. Because right now, you're the only thing standing between my men and a body count. He paused. There are 19 more casualties waiting for you. Can you handle it? I looked at the soldier on the table, breathing steadily now, alive because of what I could do. Yes, sir. I can handle it. Good. He turned to leave, then stopped. Dr. Webb, your father was wrong about you. The words hit harder than I expected. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and moved to scrub for the next surgery. But as I stood at the sink, watching the blood spiral down the drain, I couldn't shake the image of that puncture mark on the first soldier's neck. Someone on this base was systematically trying to kill these men, and I was the only person who seemed to have noticed. The question was, who could I trust with that information? The next soldier they brought me had shrapnel wounds scattered across his chest and abdomen. Standard combat trauma, the kind I trained for but never actually treated outside of simulations. My hands moved automatically. Debride, irrigate, close. But my mind was spinning. 3 casualties in, I'd started noticing the pattern. Not all the wounds matched the reported attack. Some were too precise, too deliberate. The soldier with the severed femoral artery. That injury had been made worse intentionally. The poisoned soldier in Bay 1's, that wasn't combat trauma at all. Someone was using the chaos of the attack to eliminate specific targets. Suction, I said to the nurse. She complied immediately. These military nurses work differently than civilian staff. Faster, more efficient. No wasted words. They'd seen worse than this. Doctor. The younger nurse, maybe 25, leaned closer. That wound pattern. I've never seen shrapnel do that. I glanced at her. She'd noticed it too. What's your name? Corporal Martinez, sir. How long have you been stationed here? 6 months? This is my second deployment. I made a decision. Corporal, I need you to do something for me, quietly. Her eyes sharpened. Yes, sir. Track which soldiers came through here with non-combat injuries. Don't be obvious about it. Just keep a list. I paused, threading another suture. And don't tell anyone what you're doing, not even your commanding officer. She hesitated for only a second. You think someone here is? I think someone here is very good at hiding murder in the middle of a massacre. I finished closing the abdomen and moved to the chest wounds. The shrapnel had missed the heart by centimeters. This soldier was lucky. Or maybe he wasn't the target. The OR door opened. The commander from earlier stepped in, face grave. Dr. Webb, the general needs to speak with you. Now. I'm in the middle of surgery. He said it's urgent. About your father. My hand stopped. What about my father? He's on his way here. The general thought you should know. The room tilted slightly. My father. Coming here. Of course he was. This was a military base, a crisis, exactly the kind of situation where Colonel Raymond Webb would show up to take command and remind everyone why he was a legend. How long until he arrives? 30 minutes? Maybe less. 30 minutes. I had 30 minutes before I had to face the man who'd spent my entire life making me feel like a failure for choosing to save lives instead of end them. 30 minutes before he saw me here, in a military setting, doing exactly what he'd always said I wasn't brave enough to do. Tell the general I'll speak with him as soon as this soldier is stable. The commander left. Corporal Martinez was watching me with curious eyes. Your father is Colonel Webb? She asked quietly. Unfortunately. I've heard stories about him. They say he's the toughest officer in the regiment. They're not wrong. I tied off the final suture. He's tough on everyone, especially his son who didn't become a soldier. I stripped off my gloves and headed for the scrub sink. Through the small window in the OR, I could see the medical building's main corridor. Soldiers moved in organized chaos, carrying supplies, transporting wounded, coordinating response. This was my father's world, a world he'd made very clear I didn't belong in. The general was waiting for me outside the OR. Up close, I could see the worry lines around his eyes, the exhaustion in his posture. This wasn't just another crisis for him. This was personal. Dr. Webb, he said, walk with me. We moved down the corridor, away from the main trauma area. He led me to a small office and closed the door. I need to tell you something before your father arrives, he began. The attack tonight wasn't random. Someone gave the enemy our patrol routes, our guard rotations, everything. We lost good men because someone on this base betrayed us. I know, I said. I've been seeing evidence of it in the casualties. His eyebrows rose. You noticed? Some of the wounds don't match combat trauma. They're too deliberate. Someone used the attack as cover to eliminate specific targets. I paused. Do you know who the traitor is? If I did, they'd already be in custody. He leaned against the desk. Your father and I served together for 15 years. He saved my life twice. When he told me he had a son, I assumed... He trailed off. You assumed I was in the military, too. I assumed he was proud of you, but tonight, when I mentioned you to him on the phone, he barely responded. Just said you were coming and then changed the subject. The general studied me. Why doesn't he talk about you? The question was so direct, so unexpected, that I almost laughed. Because I'm not what he wanted. He wanted a son who would follow him into combat. He got a son who saves the people he trains to kill. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The bluntness caught me off guard. The general shook his head. Dr. Webb, in the last 3 hours, you've saved 7 lives that would have been lost. You've done it under combat conditions, with minimal resources, while someone on this base is actively trying to increase the body count. That's more courage than most soldiers show in their entire careers. I didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever framed it that way before. That choosing to save lives took courage, too. There's something else, the general continued. We have 5 more casualties in a secure bunker on the eastern perimeter. They're critical, but we can't move them to this facility. It's too exposed. I need you to operate there, in the field, with whatever supplies we can carry. Why can't you move them? Because one of them is the soldier who can identify the traitor. And if the traitor knows we have him, he'll finish the job. The general's voice dropped. Your father is coming here to find that traitor. But I need you to keep that soldier alive long enough for us to get answers. Field surgery in an unsecured location with a traitor hunting us. This was exactly the kind of impossible situation my father would have thrived in. The kind of mission that would have made him proud if I were anyone other than who I was. When do we leave? The general smiled grimly. As soon as you're ready. And Dr. Webb, Don't tell anyone where you're going. Not even the people you think you can trust. I thought about Corporal Martinez, about the medics in Bay 1, about every soldier I'd worked with tonight. Any one of them could be the traitor. Any one of them could be waiting for an opportunity to finish what they'd started. I'll need a medical kit, portable monitoring equipment, and 2 units of O-negative blood. You'll have it. We leave in 10 minutes. He opened the door, then paused. Your father should be landing in 20 minutes. By the time he figures out where you are, you'll already be in the bunker. Good, I said, because the last thing I needed right now was Colonel Raymond Webb watching me fail. But as I packed my medical supplies, as I prepared to walk into an unsecured location to perform surgery on a soldier who could identify a traitor, I couldn't help but wonder, what would my father think if he knew what I was about to do? Would he finally see me as brave? Or would he just find another way to prove I wasn't enough? Dr. Webb, the general appeared at my shoulder. We need to move now. I picked up my bag, heavier now with emergency supplies, and followed him toward the east exit. Behind me, I could hear the helicopter approaching, the one carrying my father. I didn't look back. Outside, 3 soldiers waited with rifles and night vision gear. The bunker was half a mile away, through territory that might still be compromised. Every step would be a risk. Stay close to me, one soldier said. If shooting starts, get down and don't move. I nodded. My hands were steady, my mind clear. This was just another emergency, another impossible situation where someone's life depended on me staying calm. We moved into the darkness, leaving the lights of the base behind. Somewhere in that medical building, my father would arrive and demand to know where I was. Somewhere in that bunker, a dying soldier held the key to stopping a traitor. And somewhere between who I was and who my father wished I'd been, I had to figure out how to save them all. But as we reached the tree line, as the base disappeared behind us, I heard something that made my blood freeze. The sound of gunfire, close, too close. And then, cutting through the night, "The doctor is compromised. Take him down." The soldiers around me raised their weapons, but I couldn't tell if they were protecting me or preparing to follow orders. The soldier closest to me grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a tree. "Stay down," he hissed. The gunfire intensified, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness ahead. I pressed myself against the rough bark, my medical bag clutched to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who's shooting?" I whispered. "I don't know." His voice was tight with tension. "Could be enemy combatants who breached the perimeter. Could be the traitor," I finished. He didn't deny it. Another burst of gunfire, closer this time. I could hear shouting in the distance, orders being barked, the organized chaos of soldiers responding to threat. But something felt wrong about this. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. "We need to reach that bunker," the soldier said. The general's orders were clear. The general's orders might get us killed. I looked at him in the darkness. What if someone knew we were coming out here? His expression changed. "You think this is a setup?" Before I could answer, a figure emerged from the trees ahead. Another soldier, running fast, weapon raised. My escort brought up his rifle, but the newcomer shouted, "Friendly! Don't shoot!" It was one of the soldiers from the medical building. He reached us, breathing hard. "The bunker's been compromised. We need to evacuate the casualties now." "Compromised how?" my escort demanded. "Someone set charges. If we don't move those men in the next 10 minutes, they're dead." I stood up, ignoring the protest from my escort. "Then we don't have time to debate. Take me there." We ran through the darkness, 3 soldiers forming a protective triangle around me. The bunker entrance came into view, a concrete structure half buried in the hillside, its door hanging open. Inside, I could hear groaning, someone calling for help. I pushed through the entrance. The bunker was small, lit by a single emergency lamp. 5 soldiers lay on makeshift stretchers, their conditions varying from stable to critical. But my eyes locked on the devices attached to the walls, small blinking red lights. "Everybody out!" I shouted. "Now! We can't move them without. We don't have a choice." I grabbed the nearest stretcher, a soldier with an abdominal wound. "Each of you take one. Move!" They responded to the command in my voice, the same authoritative tone I used in the OR when seconds mattered. We carried the stretchers out one by one, moving as fast as we dared with critical patience. I had just reached the entrance with the last soldier when I heard it. A sharp electronic beep. "Run!" someone screamed. The explosion threw me forward. I hit the ground hard, my ears ringing, dust and debris raining down. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then training kicked in. I rolled onto my hands and knees, checking myself for injuries. Nothing serious, just bruises and ringing ears. Around me, the other soldiers were getting up, coughing, disoriented. But the 5 casualties were still alive, still breathing. We'd gotten them out in time. Dr. Webb. The general appeared through the smoke, his face streaked with dirt. Behind him, I saw more soldiers, including one figure who made my stomach drop. My father. Colonel Raymond Webb stood there in full uniform, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. His son covered in dust and blood, surrounded by wounded soldiers he just saved from an explosion. "Marcus," he said, "just my name, nothing else." The general stepped forward. "Colonel, your son just saved 5 of my men. Someone tried to kill them, and he got them out." My father's eyes moved from me to the wounded soldiers, to the smoking remains of the bunker. I waited for him to say something dismissive. Something about how I'd taken unnecessary risks, how a real soldier would have handled it differently. Instead, he said, "Who's the most critical?" The question surprised me. "The one with the abdominal wound. He needs surgery immediately." "Then stop standing here and do your job." He turned to the soldiers. "Get these men back to the medical building. Dr. Webb, you have an OR waiting." It wasn't pride. It wasn't approval. But it was acknowledgement. And from my father, that was more than I'd ever gotten before. We moved as a unit back toward the base, carrying the wounded. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched, still being hunted. The traitor had tried to kill these men twice now. They wouldn't stop until the job was finished, and I was the only thing standing in their way. The soldier with the abdominal wound was crashing by the time we got him on the table. His blood pressure had dropped dangerously low, his breathing shallow and rapid. I could see the moment my father stepped into the OR observation area above. Could feel his presence, even though I didn't look up. "Pressure 70/40, Corporal Martinez reported. Her voice was steady, despite the chaos of the last hour. "Push another unit of ONEG and get me a central line kit." My hands moved automatically, exposing the wound. The damage was extensive. Liver laceration, possible bowel perforation. This was going to take hours we didn't have. I worked methodically, controlling bleeding, repairing tissue, removing shrapnel. The observation window felt like a spotlight. My father was up there, watching me work for the first time in my life, judging me by the standards he'd used my entire career. Military precision, decisive action, no room for weakness. "Doctor, we're losing him," Martinez said quietly. The monitor showed his heart rate dropping. I could pack the liver, close him up, hope he survived long enough for a medical evacuation. That was the safe choice. The military choice. But it wasn't the right choice. "We're not losing him," I said. "Clamp." I went deeper, finding the source of the bleeding, repairing what everyone else would have called irreparable. My father had always said medicine was for people who couldn't make the hard calls. But this was the hardest call, choosing to fight for a life when everyone else had given up. 20 minutes later, the bleeding stopped. The soldier's pressure stabilized. I closed the incision and stepped back. Through the observation window, I saw my father's expression. I couldn't read it. The general's voice came through the intercom. "Dr. Webb, we need you in the conference room. Your patient is stable enough." I stripped off my gloves and headed upstairs. The conference room was full. My father, the general, 3 other officers I didn't recognize. Maps covered the table, showing the base layout, patrol routes, defensive positions. "We know who the traitor is," the general said without preamble. He pointed to a photograph on the table. "Captain David Brenner. He's been feeding information to enemy forces for 6 months. The soldier you just operated on saw him communicating with them before the attack." I studied the photograph. Young, clean-cut, decorated. "Where is he now?" "That's the problem," my father said. His voice was harder than I remembered. "He's in the medical building. He knows we're on to him, and he has access to all the casualties." My blood ran cold. "He could finish what he started." "Exactly." The general looked at me. "Which is why you need to get back there now. We're sending a security team, but you're the only person who knows which patients he might target." "He's a doctor, not a soldier," my father interrupted. "Send someone trained for this." "With respect, Colonel, your son has kept more of my men alive tonight than any soldier I have. He knows the medical building, knows the patients, and Brenner doesn't know we've identified him yet." The general turned to me. "Can you do this?" I looked at my father. His jaw was tight, his eyes showing something I'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For me. "Yes, sir," I said. "I can do this." My father started to protest, but I was already moving toward the door. I heard him behind me, his footsteps heavy on the floor. "Marcus, wait." I stopped but didn't turn around. "You don't have to prove anything," he said quietly. "Not to me, not to anyone." "Yes, I do." I finally looked at him. "I've spent my entire life trying to prove that saving lives matters as much as taking them, that my choice was valid, that I was enough. You are enough." The words seemed to cost him something. "You always were." I just couldn't see it. There wasn't time to process that. Wasn't time to ask what had changed. Why now, after all these years? The medical building was waiting. Captain Brenner was waiting. And people would die if I didn't move. "We'll talk after," I said. "If there is an after." I ran toward the medical building, 2 armed soldiers flanking me. Through the windows, I could see normal activity. Nurses checking vitals. Medics restocking supplies. No sign of Brenner. But he was there somewhere, waiting for his moment. I pushed through the entrance just as the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in red. And in that crimson light, I saw him. Captain Brenner, standing over the soldier from Bay 1, a syringe in his hand. Our eyes met across the room. He smiled. And then he ran. I didn't think. I just moved. My father's voice echoed in my head from years ago, teaching me tactics, even though I'd insisted I'd never need them. In a crisis, speed matters more than perfection. Move first, adjust later. Brenner was fast, but he didn't know the medical building layout like I did. He headed toward the east corridor, a dead end. I took the parallel hallway, cutting him off before he realized his mistake. We collided at the intersection. He was bigger, stronger, trained for combat, but I had something he didn't expect. A scalpel I'd grabbed from my pocket, and the knowledge of exactly where to cut to disable without killing. "Don't," I said, holding the blade steady. My hand didn't shake. It's over. He looked at me, then at the scalpel. You won't do it. You're a doctor. You save lives. I save lives worth saving. For a moment, we stayed frozen. Then I heard footsteps. The security team, my father, the general, all converging on our location. Brenner's eyes flickered toward the sound, measuring his chances. Why? I asked. Why betray your own men? Because this war is wrong. Because people like your father keep it going for glory while good soldiers die. His voice was bitter. I was trying to end it. By killing the people you served with? By killing the leadership that perpetuates it. The security team burst around the corner, weapons raised. My father was with them, his face pale when he saw me holding Brenner at scalpel point. Stand down, Captain, the general ordered. Brenner looked at me one last time. Your father ruined lives with his orders. You just cleaned up his mess. We're not so different. We're nothing alike. I stepped back, lowering the scalpel. I chose to save people. You chose to kill them. That's the difference. They took him away in handcuffs. The medical building slowly returned to normal activity. Nurses resuming rounds, medics checking on patients. The crisis was over. The traitor was caught. Everyone would survive the night because of the choices I'd made. My father approached slowly. We stood in the hallway, years of silence and disappointment hanging between us. He struggled for words. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. It was just doing my job. No. He shook his head. It was more than that. Marcus, I've spent 30 years in combat. I've led men into impossible situations. I've made the hard calls that cost lives to save others. And tonight, I watched you do the same thing. Except you found ways to save everyone. Even the traitor. He paused. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. The words I'd wanted to hear my entire life. But now that I had them, they felt hollow. Because I'd already learned the truth. I didn't need his approval. I never had. I'm not doing this for your validation anymore, I said quietly. I'm doing it because it's who I am. Because saving lives matters, whether you believe that or not. I do believe it. His voice cracked slightly. I saw it tonight. Every soldier you saved, every decision you made, you're a better leader than I ever was. You're braver than any soldier I've commanded, and I'm sorry it took me this long to see it. Before I could respond, the general appeared. Dr. Webb, I need you outside, now. We walked out together, my father, the general, and me. The entire unit was assembled on the parade ground, standing at attention. Every soldier I'd treated, every nurse I'd worked with, every officer who doubted me, they were all there. The general stepped forward, his voice carrying across the silent formation. Tonight, this base suffered a coordinated attack and an internal betrayal. We lost good soldiers, but we would have lost many more without the actions of one person. He turned to me. Dr. Marcus Webb operated under combat conditions, identified the traitor's pattern, and saved lives while enemy fire surrounded his position. He displayed courage beyond measure and skill beyond question. He faced my father directly. Colonel Webb, your son saved my unit. He saved men I've served with for 20 years. He did what no soldier could do. He found a way to win without losing anyone else. My father's face transformed. Pride, regret, love, all of it visible for the first time I could remember. The general continued. I'm recommending Dr. Webb for the Soldier's Medal for heroism, and I'm making sure every base in this region knows what he did here tonight. The formation erupted in applause, not polite, perfunctory clapping, but genuine, thunderous appreciation. Soldiers I'd never met were cheering. Nurses were crying. Even the hardened officers were nodding with respect. My father stepped forward. In front of everyone, in front of his entire world, he said, "Marcus, I've been a terrible father. I measured you against the wrong standard. I wanted you to be a soldier when you were already a warrior. Just a different kind. The kind who fights to save lives instead of take them. The kind who runs toward danger with a scalpel instead of a gun. And that takes more courage than anything I've ever done." I felt tears on my cheeks, but didn't wipe them away. "Dad, no, let me finish." His voice was rough. "I'm proud of you, not because of tonight, though tonight was extraordinary. I'm proud of you because you chose your own path, and you walked it with integrity. You became exactly who you were meant to be, despite me trying to make you into something else. And I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. For 32 years, I'd wanted to hear those words. For 32 years, I thought they would fix everything. But standing there, surrounded by soldiers I'd saved, I realized something. I didn't need fixing. I never had. "I forgive you," I said, "but I need you to understand. I'm not changing. This is who I am. A surgeon, a doctor, someone who saves lives." "I know." He smiled, genuine warmth reaching his eyes for the first time I could remember. "And I'm grateful for that. The world needs more people like you." The general cleared his throat. "Dr. Webb, you're welcome on any base I command, any time, for any reason." He extended his hand. "Thank you for your service." I shook it, feeling the weight of those words. Service. Not the kind my father had always valued, but service nonetheless. As the formation dismissed, as soldiers came up to thank me, as my father stood beside me, for once looking genuinely proud, I thought about that young man who'd chosen medicine over military, who'd walked away from his father's expectations to follow his own calling. He'd been right all along, and it had taken a night of combat, betrayal, and impossible choices to prove it. Have you ever had to prove yourself in a place where nobody expected you to succeed? Drop a comment and share your story. I'd love to hear how you found the courage to stay true to yourself.